Hey everybody, today we're going to be doing a react stream to the new Superman trailer, so let's take a look. Interesting. So it looks like Superman's been knocked out. We've seen this sort of thing before. I'm not really a huge Superman lore person. I know some things about him. I think my father's generation is a little bit more Superman oriented. I did a few Superman oriented things. Worked on a pilot with a friend of mine, Phil, a script for a spin-off of the TV show Smallville many years ago that did not end up going anywhere, but we've seen this sort of Superman gets knocked out thing. I mean, it's sort of a trope, right? All right, so here we have him as Clark Kent. Daily Planet. See, that's interesting. We don't normally see Superman being beaten to the point where he has like blood visible. I remember in the show, the animated show Justice League Unlimited, I think it might have been the finale of the cartoon, where he has this great speech, Superman, about how he's holding back in a world full of cardboard, and he's fighting that dark side character, that Jack Kirby character from the New Gods, and it really was this sort of show of his force. So it's interesting that James Gunn has chosen to show on screen that there's actually a physically demanding threat to his version of Superman. That's kind of interesting, because in the mythology of Superman, in the American myth-making universe of Superman, we sometimes think of him as the head of this pantheon. Like if you look at the comic book Kingdom Come, back from when I was a teenager, like you would see the gods sort of used as analogs for the DC pantheon. And I remember that the prevailing idea was that Marvel has superheroes, but DC has gods, these sort of representational figures that can, through some way or another, transcend the humanity. And maybe that was a crutch for certain storytelling tropes. Maybe that was bad branding, because for quite some time DC suffered from an issue of humanizing their characters. But this is an interesting way to humanize Superman. So we have the Kent farm. I'm guessing maybe that's Pa Kent. It's kind of an interesting take on that too, because even in the comics, what you would traditionally see was a very stoic sort of Pa Kent, very almost like I don't want to say Taylor Sheridan-y, kind of Yellowstone-y, cragged face kind of guy. And it's interesting how Kevin Costner played Pa Kent in the Zack Snyder Superman film or films, because he kind of has that way about him. But the ones that I liked were always the DC animated universe sort of takes, where Ma and Pa Kent are much more like kindly and elderly, and this kind of works inside of that, because he's really showcasing to Clark Kent, Kal-El Superman, that he's aging and he is vulnerable, and you can see sort of in this image the love that uh, Clark has for his adopted father, the way that he's looking at him. I don't know the story of what's happening in this trailer, but I know that what they're trying to telegraph to us is that Clark's love of humanity really comes from his love of his parents and the way that they raised him. And that there's a juxtaposition there that Superman doesn't really age. He doesn't have these vulnerabilities, these human frailties. And the way that maybe he wants to help protect humanity and the world at large is almost a factor of like how Superman deals with the frailty of his parents, his mother and father. So I think that's a really interesting choice to have Pa Kent looking so aged and vulnerable. It's really beautiful. All right, so he's whistling, and you're seeing this dust cloud coming, and the only thing that I can imagine here is that this is Krypto the superdog. I don't really know if it's a golden age thing, a silver age thing. I know that I've seen him in a couple of animated adaptations as well. I always thought it was a little bit strange. Sometimes you would get these super animal sidekick friends during the age when the Comics Code Authority had a lot of sway over the censorship. If you remember the Seduction of the Youth, which led to the banning of certain things like Tales from the Crypt and other kinds of comics, because the U.S. government at the time, very conservative, sort of on the back of like McCarthy and all these other censorious things happening in the United States zeitgeist of the mid 20th century. The comics kind of fell under that I don't know, sway of this authoritarian bent that was happening in media, saying that dark stories were corrupting children and so on and so forth. And so I think maybe not as a direct reaction to that, but as a sort of ripple outward from that, what you would see were these ways to try to make the superheroes more kid-friendly, kid-oriented. Maybe instead of it being for like 12-year-olds, it sort of became more for like 6-7-year-olds. And that was a really pervasive attitude in a lot of illustrated and animated media in most of the 20th century. So Krypto the Superdog, and I don't know if this is Krypto the Superdog. I'm guessing it is because Superman whistled and we see this dust cloud coming toward him. Krypto the Superdog was part of that wave of softening the superheroes. So if they have pets, if they have like basically a Superman version of Lassie, then maybe it will be a little more wholesome and they will not have to worry as much about government pressure and censorship. So let's see where that goes, because they've done some interesting things over the last maybe decade and a half with, I think Batman has a dog. I forget the name of it. I know Krypto the Superdog in the Jeff Loeb, Jim Lee. There was a Supergirl comic. I don't know what comic it was in, but Krypto, was sort of snarling and mean. He's a little bit of an attack dog. He's very sweet, but he also has a very dark side to him. And of course, I think Ace the Bat Hound is what it's called, was also put there to sort of soften Batman's image a little bit too. So let's see what they do with potentially Krypto the Superdog. All right, that's a charming dog. I'm a big animal guy. Really love animals. Love my pets, and man, that is a very charming version of Krypto. And it's a little ridiculous. He's got the cape, but comic books are in many ways inherently ridiculous. So let's see where it goes. Oh, he's begging him to take him home. I think this shot of Superman saving this little girl from some kind of an explosion. I am going to guess that this is put in here specifically to counteract what we perceived, the general public perceived as a lack of compassion in the Zack Snyder version of Superman, and ultimately his version of the Justice League. You know, like how he killed Zod in the one movie. I didn't see that film, but I did see a lot of clips and reactions and things to it, and there was a big backlash against Superman being more violent and not caring so much about collateral damage and things. Well, obviously, this is Superman caring very much about collateral damage. Hey, wait a minute. Was that Nick Holt? Let's see. Hey, that is. You know, he is Nick Holt is a wonderful actor. I really like the work that he did in Yorgos Lanthimos' The Favorite. He's always just charming as hell. Loved him in The Menu. If you see the television series The Great, I've seen a couple episodes of that, and I really like his characterization. Really fun stuff. So, what are we looking at here? It looks like Superman is in some kind of a containment vessel of some sort. It looks like they're really going to try to put him through it in this one. Okay, he's breaking out. And I think that that kid raising the flag, and I'm going to go back to it here. Let's see. Yeah, here we go. I think this might be alluding to a recent comic where Superman hears this like cry for help. There's an intergalactic sort of war that's raging on this planet, and there's like a kid that is begging for Superman to help her, an alien child on another planet where there's a war raging, and Superman actually comes down and saves the kid, and you know, the kid is like, well, I knew you would come because you're Superman. So it's kind of interesting that how we would look at this maybe even in the real world, if there was a figure like Superman, a transnationalist power, really that is maybe one of the strongest powers on Earth, you would make this assumption that vulnerable people would rally and beg Superman for help. That, you know, ties in a little bit with not necessarily the biblical version of Jesus, which there's, you know, been allusions to, or connections made in the past between like Superman and Jesus. I actually don't think that Superman is that much of an analog for Jesus, as much as Superman is maybe an analog for like Samson or some of those other you know, kind of, you know, Jewish Old Testament heroes. So especially with kryptonite being similar to, you know, how Samson was able to do many great deeds until his hair was cut, and he has this one vulnerability, right? Same as like kryptonite has like a one vulnerability. So if you have this incredibly powerful figure that people are rallying behind that doesn't seem to represent necessarily the United States government, and I think maybe Alan Moore's Watchmen does a better job of deconstructing that idea that, you know, Superman or the Superman, the Ubermensch, whatever, Dr. Manhattan in that story, would be inherently nationalist and initially weaponized as a national weapon. Well, Superman rejects that. If Superman says, I have good values, but I'm not from here, and he puts that out into the world, then what you're going to start seeing, in the real world, you would see people in Ukraine and people in Gaza, Palestine, places like that. They would be looking to Superman to step in and save them from things that are legal but not necessarily moral. So he would really be a power to potentially step in and right moral wrongs, not necessarily legal wrongs. And I think there's a distinction in the zeitgeist right now where we see so many corrupt laws in the way that laws are enforced, and you see if there was a figure like Superman, what side would he be on? Would he take that ethical, philosophical side and just help whoever needs help? I think he would, based on what we talked about earlier about the Ma and Pa Kent and how he views humanity as something that is delicate and fragile and but ultimately beautiful, sort of like a wilting flower, something to be handled with care. And I think Superman wants to be a good custodian of the people of Earth. Okay, so obviously something happened, and Superman is being, I don't know who this guy is. Maybe that's, maybe he's Green Lantern. I see he's got a ring on his finger, but obviously there's something happened with Superman and people are stepping in, so. Okay. All right, so we've got Hawk Girl, another alien. There are different interpretations. Sometimes Hawk Girl is tied to mythology, Egyptian mythology specifically. Sometimes Hawk Girl is looked at as an alien. So it's kind of cool that they're bringing together like the Justice League. All right, so let me go back through. Yeah, that's definitely Green Lantern here, and there's Hawk Girl. So they're really doing a lot of work here. I don't know what this is, some kind of a dragon, an alien creature. I have no idea. But what I do like in this montage, where you see Clark, Superman here, and in the background we just saw, these Justice League characters. We saw this alien dragon creature, and here in this one thing that blipped by really quick, we're now paused on it, you see something in the back. I don't know exactly what it is, some kind of energy thing. I'm guessing alien in nature, super science in nature, but this really underscores the idea that Superman exists in a world of cosmic horror. And we can look at that and maybe even say like that when these superheroes were being created in, the early part of the 20th century, there was a popular counterpoint to this. There was a lot of weird tales, things that were happening at the same time, like H.P. Lovecraft and Cthulhu Mythos and these pulp magazines that were really exploring the idea of these eldritch terrors, these things that are unknowable and being awakened and coming for us. And in some ways, if we look at Conan the Barbarian and Robert Howard and what he was writing, you look at Conan as a mortal man who is fighting wizards and gods, showing the resilience of humanity and saying that humanity, it's almost a very secularist, very atheistic way to look at these mythological stories, to say that Conan is able to overcome these incredible odds as a flesh and blood mortal man. No god or monster is going to stop Conan the Barbarian, and it's a metaphor for really the resilience and the strength of humanity. We can look at Superman as almost a rejection of that idea. And this is maybe where some of these connections to Jesus come in for some people, where he's an otherworldly savior, right? If you're looking at it, of course, the creators were Jewish, so maybe it's more of a Moses, being sent down the river. We've seen that. The same thing in the way that people look at the New Testament and they say, well, it's like, Jor-El is God and he sent his only son, to save humanity. Well, that's not necessarily true, because Jor-El was sending Superman to Earth, Kal-El, to save him, the same way that Moses was sent down the river and became a favorite of Pharaoh. The same way we can look at Superman being sent to Earth and being favored by the powers of the United States government, truth, justice, and the American way. And then eventually, through most Superman stories, most good Superman stories, he finds a rejection of that notion that that the United States is the only good and just and morally correct power, and he separates himself from it and wants to do right by all of humanity. But fundamentally, the background radiation of all the stories like Conan and H.P. Lovecraft and all that is that there are these unknowable forces, these things that we cannot control, the things that are beyond us, the cosmic horror of it all. And what happens is Superman is a way for the universe to have sent us something to help us to overcome it. That is in many ways antithetical to what I was saying about Conan. So it's a different way of looking at the kind of hero we need, the kind of savior we need. It's for people who look to externalities in these science fictional universes where humanity really should have been destroyed many times over, versus some of these homegrown heroes. And let's see here. There was another thing I wanted to look at. That was kind of cool. That's the super. What is that? The Superbot. So I don't know if this is a Superman robot or if this is like Metallo or one of these villains. It looks like he's in the Fortress of Solitude. So in certain comics from like the Silver Age, revisited in stories like All Star Superman, what you would end up with is this army of robots, because Superman is a super intelligent force in addition to being just a physical force. And it's kind of cool because he has this army of robots that he's made using Kryptonian technology, and he, in many of these stories, is slowly, as humanity is ready for it, revealing the knowledge of Krypton to humanity. And it looks like if one of his robots was damaged or destroyed in this new film, then there's a real interesting turn there, because now he's facing something where he's neither physically superior, like we saw in the opening shots, nor is he technologically superior. So he actually has to start maybe relying on things that are not inherent to him. And that is always the challenge with Superman. How would someone with such inherent abilities, physically and mentally, and access to this incredible technology, everything seems easy to him. So I think James Gunn is setting up a really interesting conflict here. It's the Fortress of Solitude. There's some kind of a creature, more Lex Luthor, and Krypto being a good boy. That's Mr. Terrific. All right, so we're bringing in like a lot of DC characters. Looks like maybe Green Lantern was handling that problem. July 11th. All right, so there we go. That was the trailer. I like that they are bringing in a lot of these sort of side characters, Justice League characters, into this. Not just because I'm excited about seeing the characters. I'm honestly, I'm a little agnostic to comic book movies, and I don't get hyped up and excited like a fan, you know, for some of this stuff. But what I do like from a storytelling perspective is that there are a lot of powerful people in this universe that they're constructing, and it's sort of their reaction to Superman, right? Like, with so many powerful people, it puts him sort of within a pecking order. It puts him, you know, in a place where everybody's a little bit scared of Superman. Some people will view him as the savior I was talking about before. Some people might view him as a person with the ability to be a dictator, and that's always a conflict also in Superman stories. Like if you look at Superman Red Son, which is where Superman landed in Russia instead of the United States, and he was sort of taken in by Stalin. He wasn't a villain in that necessarily either. Stalin was sort of set up as a villain, and Superman deposes him, and he's really, in that way, a benevolent dictator toward the end of that story, but a dictator nonetheless, and he's positioned against like Lex Luthor, who, you know, believes in representational democracy and Republican kind of government. Republican, you know, in the classic sense, not in the Republican Party sense. So this seems like it might be a really interesting film. I may check it out. I love the lore building. It's American mythology. It's American folklore, constantly being remixed and reimagined. And I think James Gunn is an interesting filmmaker to tackle this with. So thanks a lot. Thanks for joining me. If you like the content that we're putting out, make sure to like and subscribe. If you want to check out the description, there's other things down there where you can take a look at maybe like the Patreon, stuff like that. And we're going to be doing more vlogs, mailbags, reacts, all that kind of stuff in addition to the other content that we put up. So thanks for joining me. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.